Good afternoon. This is Speaking of Spirits, and I am Colleen. I'm here with Tim
Hello.
and
Hello.
Gina.
Hi.
And today, Tim had the topic. What did you pick?
Well, I've been going down lots of rabbit holes lately, but my favorite one is weather modification and manipulation.
So,
And
there's a lot online about this stuff, right? With HARP and everything else. And do you really believe that they're modifying weather?
well, do I believe they are? Yes. Is it to the scale of catastrophe? I don't know. The school's still out. But did you
Okay.
ever in science school uh, make a cloud?
Yeah.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
And I've always remembered that. And when I was young and then going through school, I thought, well, if it's a drought, why don't we just make a bunch of clouds?
Well, they've been seeding clouds since the '60s, right?
hmm
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, but
So
but that
is
that seems to be all we're capable of doing.
but is that manipulating weather?
I don't think so. It's really
No.
localized. It's really localized on a small scale. First off, it costs a shit ton of money to see clouds. So there's that. And then it's localized. Like they did it over the Sierra Nevadas in the '70s because of the drought we were in. And they seeded it over the fall to build up a snowpack and essentially break the drought. Didn't really break the drought, but at least we had snow and water the next year.
hmm Well, so along with that, uh, I have a couple different trains of thought.
Okay.
My favorite plane in the entire world is the SR-71 Blackbird.
Oh boy. Yeah.
It, it's really cool,
Yeah, it
and
is.
I really, really like it. And no one knew that that plane existed for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was from the late 60s to the early 80s that nobody knew about it. Well, people knew about it, but it wasn't released.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Yeah.
I think about escalation of technologies, and it seems that all the technologies and all the modern things and all of the AI insert here, it all boils down to frequencies. And if you're able to manipulate frequencies, you're able to manipulate the consequences of those frequencies. And that is interesting to me in lots of levels because you have a government who's pretty good at hiding things sometimes, depending, and
Sometimes.
you have escalation of technology,
Yeah.
and I think it all boils down to frequency. And when you boil those three aspects together and you look at the weather the past 5 years or so, it leads one to say, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, perhaps it's a chicken.
Yeah. That's well. Yeah. Gina, what
hmm
are your thoughts?
Well, I would say I 100% believe in energy manipulation. And the reason that I say that is I am an energy healer, a Reiki master, and I can send Reiki around the world. I just have to think of the person. I have to direct my energy. I've sent it to you and your animals, Colleen. I
Yeah.
have helped people with their cancer treatments without even having to be anywhere near where they are.
Okay.
So, as
Right.
far as being able to manipulate or shift energy, I 100% believe that. I'm one
So
person, but I think if you had the correct technology, which is not my friend, we've all determined that one today, but if you have the right technology, I feel like it's a possibility.
yeah, I understand. I understand sending energy. I understand that, and I understand kind of what you're talking about there, Tim. Maybe not really on board with the whole frequency aspect, but what weather? is on such an enormous scale. Like, we have the spin up of the supercells in the Midwest. You have the clashing of, the cold air from Alaska that's coming down and they collides with the Gulf of Mexico, warm air coming north. You get these supercells, spin up tornadoes, everything else. I don't see anything that we're capable of to manipulate that, to
Well,
either stop it or start it or make. If we had, then why aren't we stopping tornadoes?
and manipulating isn't starting or stopping; it's influencing.
Right. But did you hear of Project Storm Fury?
Uh huh.
Yeah, they tried it and it was a colossal failure, because so what they were trying to do was decrease the winds of a hurricane about 10%. Now, what they're doing is trying to manipulate the eye of the hurricane. Somehow they get in there and they were going to manipulate the eye wall, and if you could do that and lessen the energy of the storm by 10%, then it wouldn't be these enormous category, fours and fives, or that you get, or even threes, and how destructive they are. But they were able to manipulate it a little bit, but not on a frequency that would allow us to say it was a success. They got in there, screwed with a few hurricanes, and then threw up their hands because they said it's just, we can't do it. It's not effective enough every time we want to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I'm so on the fence with this.
Well, the thing that so I really like Tennessee.
Hmm.
It's one of my favorite places,
Me too.
and uh, the hurricane that really affected Tennessee uh, was interesting. Like, while it was happening, there was a lot of radar that I was looking at, and then screenshots that I saw that have had wave patterns inside of the tornado. So
Hmm.
there was 12 or 13 waves, and they were perfect circles around the tornado. And or tornado, cyclone is what I wanted to say there. And I don't recall ever seeing that in any other radar image. I don't pretend to say that I look at much, but I tried looking into what I saw, and good old Google didn't have anything for me. And I don't necessarily trust Google, especially for those reasons.
Well, yeah, I agree with that.
But it was amazing what I saw as it was happening.
Hmm.
And like, it honestly didn't feel like a natural course, and it felt manipulated. I'm not saying my feeling is correct, but I did see weird things, and it was a weird hurricane.
Hmm.
So it,
Yeah, I understand where you look at that kind of stuff and go, oh my God, but it's like the perfect storm, right? Of a
yeah.
sequence of events that happen. And I think that just happens. And I don't think it's being manipulated. I just can't get on board with the government being able to put a lid on that kind of stuff, because it would take so much involvement from so many people. And if we're manipulating our weather, it's also manipulating weather across the world. Can you imagine our government trying to do something like that and getting the
Well, and
buy offs?
that's just it. I am less and less thinking our government is in charge of anything.
Okay.
But I do
Yeah.
believe that there is an organization, and I do believe that they have manipulation efforts.
Well, it would be interesting to take this. So there's a lot of guys that I follow, and I follow them live. They're storm hunters. It's what they do, right? They're weathermen and women, and they chase storms no matter what storm it is. And a couple of them that I can think of off the top of my head is like a Reed Timmer or Max Velocity. These guys, I'm always on their sites and I'm always reading their data and I'm looking at their data because this is my first degree was in meteorology and it's my first love. But it would be interesting to take some of your thoughts and opinions and ask them what they think and what they saw and how can they explain it because
Yeah.
this is what they do.
Well, and that's really, I'm glad you said that word, exploit it. Because when you said perfect storm,
Hmm.
like all the variables that have to happen for a perfect storm, and I do realize that it is nature and natural things happen.
Yeah.
But what would it take to push it just that couple different percentages to do that? And when it boils down to how to compute that, like the new AI that's out right now,
Yeah.
and we only have a small percent of what is true.
Right.
It's freaking amazing what those things do. And it's so amazing that it's scary. And so having to do with percentages and consequences and all the things that it would take to make that perfect storm, it's all of a sudden more a reality.
Yeah, but how would you okay, let devil's advocate here. Let's say AI is in control of this whole thing and Gina, please interrupt if I'm but I can hear you. How would you use AI to manipulate first off the current in the Gulf, the wind pattern coming up? I mean, that's why they give you projected storm tracks for, say, a hurricane, right? Because they don't know what
Mhm.
track it's going to take, because they don't know what the winds are going to do, and they don't know what the strength's going to do. So you have all of these variables, and that's why they model these tracks. And then, how would you use AI to change a current?
Well, so I think you would use AI for probability. And if you had other ways to control it and had the AI for probability on where to put something, that's the AI is the probability. I think that there's influences. Like, I think it's the frequency thing. I think frequency is everything. And if you know the frequencies to influence things and you have the AI for probability of the influence, then it merges together to manipulate or modify.
How would you use frequency to manipulate wind and currents?
Well, what is frequency? It That's what it boils down to.
Well, it's a sound vibration, right?
Uh-huh. So, oh man, I don't know how deep down this rabbit hole do you want to go?
Let's do it, man. Yeah.
Huh? And there's frequency waves to everything. Um, like so there's been a lot of flack to this particular episode, but there was a Joe Rogan podcast and it had Terrence Howard. And I'm not saying that Terrence Howard is right about anything really,
Mm-hmm.
but it was very insightful. And a few of the things that really made sense to me is where everything is made up of atoms and the structure of atoms. And if you weave together the periodic table into frequencies, it makes total sense about what an atom does and how it's manipulated with a certain frequency. And it's really interesting. Um, there was a fella that he referenced with the periodic tables, and the name just left me. I didn't realize we were going to go down this way. But let's see. I'm trying quickly to find his name, and it's just not coming to me.
Of the guy who made the periodic table?
Yes, with frequencies. Um,
Oh. Well, anyway, keep talking. I'll find it.
Anyway, it's. Oh, is that him? Well, there's a picture of the guy, but I don't have his name right there. Dun, dun, dun. So, if you look at the periodic table of elements, they have something called a wavelength spiral. And that wavelength spiral has all the positives, negatives, frequencies, tones, like everything that's wrapped up into all of the elements. And it's a spiral pattern.
Mosley? Mosley?
That could be.
He arranged the elements in order of frequency, increasing frequency.
Yeah. Yep, that's him.
And he assigned everything the atomic numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway, if you dive into him, and I completely forgot his name. That doesn't even sound familiar to me. It is amazing how everything matches up. Like if you look up, what is it? Periodic table of elements based on the wavelength spiral. It
Law
just
of
has
octaves?
everything. What's that?
The law of octaves? It's a periodic law. It arranges things.
Walton Russell. That's it. That's why.
Ruffles?
Walton Russells.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's the periodic table of elements based on wavelength spiral. So if you boil down the periodic table of elements and you put it into that wavelength spiral, everything has a frequency. And so it doesn't boil into how can you manipulate wind, it's the atoms in the wind. It's what
really
it is.
Fascinating.
It really is. So when you have all of those frequencies and you have a way to manipulate it and you have a source of like infinite knowledge, if you will, to boil down the probabilities, you can do anything with it. It can be good, it can be bad. No, that's another thing that led me down this. Like, so yes, I was just planning on talking about weather manipulation, but I believe everything is connected with that frequency paradigm. And like, how easy would it be for an organization to decide, oh, we want that? What's the best way to get that? And then they boil it down to a fire. And then they have the frequency pattern for whatever they need for pattern, and then they start it. And it's a huge, fully engulfed fire. Isn't it? Yeah. So I personally think that Maui was an experiment for something, and I think that they used light for that, so lasers.
There's a lot of people out there who believe that. Yeah, they do. I guess the reason why I have such a hard time with this topic is because it is terrifying to think that somebody's so in control that they can erase us, essentially, a town, a region, a stretch of land. They can erase everything on it and do a land grab.
Yeah, and so what's even more scary is, like, I have a lot of rabbit hole wacky theories, but it's interesting how they all can kind of line up, and it leads to something being in charge. And I don't think it's a government. I don't think it's a people. I think it's an entity. And that's the scariest part for me, is what is that entity? I have my theories and I have my thoughts. And I have my theories and thoughts about AI too. And it seems like all of these things they try to compartmentalize them, but it seems to be one big thing. And the further and further And the further, yeah, and the further you tend to go down these rabbit holes, the more and more it feels like that.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I would have to, I'm a see it to believe it person, right? I would have to see how you could, I would love to see this in a lab. Like, how would you use the frequency to spin up you know, I would just, of course, if, okay, let's go back to the beginning where we were talking about cloud seeding. They did cloud
Mhm.
seeding in the 70s. So they whipped up some storms in the Sierras, and they're still doing it. They still do it, but it's just so costly that it's hard. It's hard to do. So you got to have things just right in the atmosphere for things to happen. And so um but if you manipulate the weather over the Sierra Nevadas, so it starts snowing or raining or whatever, well, that weather system's going to start moving west. So in a sense, you are then manipulating the weather across the whole rest of the United States, because the system's going to keep traveling, I mean, east. So um, if there wasn't a system there to begin with, and then you create one by cloud seeding, then yeah, it either is going to fall apart when it gets across the rain shadow effect of the Sierras and dissipate, or it's going to build up steam and keep moving. So, in a
Mhm.
sense, yeah, I guess cloud seeding, just from the rudimentary beginning of our discussion here, cloud seeding could manipulate weather, I suppose, across the rest of the U.S.
Yeah.
just from the Sierra Nevadas.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
I like how you're coming down the rabbit hole.
Tim. Every
Hmm.
time we get to talking about something, I start going down the hole there. So yeah, okay, so that storm system then comes over, Colorado gains steam, hits the Missouri, the plain states, hits more steam, and then all of a sudden you've got tornadoes spinning up that would have happened if you hadn't created the snow or the storm in the Sierras. So, okay, that I can see. The frequency thing, I would have to figure out how you would, because frequency. Okay, all right. Let's play more devil's advocate here, because I am really not a fan of wind turbines at all,
Yeah.
because they're
Uh-huh.
environmentally destructive at every stage. And so um, I used to inspect the facilities that made these things. They're environmentally destructive at every stage, and you can't recycle them when they're done. If it's a frequency thing, could all of the turbines around the world now be creating? We already know that whales are beaching themselves at enormous numbers now, anywhere where the turbines are out to sea. That's a given. I mean, it's a fact. They have now seen this everywhere. So, could these turbines on land be screwing with movement of air masses and causing bigger storms? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's
Mhm.
still, even with all of the data that marine biologists are presenting to every government on the planet saying, stop putting these turbines in the ocean because we're losing sea life in astronomical numbers anywhere where these things are. Um, the governments are still doing it. They're still building them. They're still allowing them to go in. So is it intentional? I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
We have a lot of turbines, and there's
see, and the
proposals for
problem with the
Idaho for
government,
unbelievable amounts of turbines to come in.
yeah, the problem with government is government's really easy. If if you pay the lobbyists and the senators, you can do whatever you want to do.
Uh-huh.
Like, it boils down to money. So it's not the intent of the government. The government is just a tool. And when you boil it down to intent, that is the scary part. Because, yeah, it sure feels like it's all planned. If you
Yeah,
boil
it
down
does.
those wind turbines, they're stupid in every way. So what's the
Yeah.
intent?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, fascinating stuff. I don't Scary stuff too. Sometimes I don't like, you go down rabbit holes, Tim, that I lose sleep over.
Yeah. So welcome to my world.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. I don't like, yeah. And don't even get me started on solar fields. So
Yeah.
that there I you want to talk about screwing with weather. That radiation coming off of those things. They're supposed to be intaking radiation and creating power out of them, right? But they're also creating these giant mirrors up into the atmosphere. Now, how come nobody's talking about this stuff? Because you want to talk about superheating the atmosphere. Let's put a giant
Mhm.
mirror out in the desert.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, great idea. And then we get huge storms to the east of the desert. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, ah, yeah, I have a hard time. It could be. I don't think anybody's really looking at that. I have read a few articles on the effect of the temperature around solar fields, like in a community, it's raising the temperature. That solar heating back up into the atmosphere from these things. But nobody's looking at, I don't know that anybody's looking at the stuff like long term, large scale. What is it doing? Because what happens when you heat the air? You heat the air, it rises. When it rises and it meets cooler air, you develop storms, right? That's how you develop
Hmm.
rain, because you condense the air. As it rises, it condenses, and then blah blah blah, you have storms. So yeah, all of this stuff could be leading to, damn it, now I'm believing you, Tim.
Thank you.
My God.
Mhm.
It's funny, until you start discussing it and start putting it in perspective, I'm like, there's no way. But Yahweh. But it could be unintentional.
Well, it could, but
It
that's
could.
the scary rabbit hole.
Yeah, is that we're screwing
Like
with stuff and we have no idea what we're doing.
you can really either boil it down to greed or
Yeah.
an intent. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, usually there's always a negative intent with greed anyway. So
True.
it's more easily manipulated. And we see that in the government every day with everything.
Right.
So
Uh, well, this was a spooky topic. I don't like it. I'd rather talk about ghosts and poltergeists. That I
yeah.
can understand.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you at least were illuminated a little bit.
Well, a lot. Now I'm thinking about that, and I'm going to start doing some research and see if there's anybody looking at this,
Yeah.
because
Well,
this
and
is scary.
that's a scary part in itself because most of the people who do are silenced.
Well, yeah, they don't want to lose their homes and their livelihood and everything else, right?
Yep.
Look at the people who came out and talked about not taking the COVID vax. Just
Yeah.
that. Just the opinion of people should be taking this. We don't have enough research. And they were stripped of everything,
Hmm.
their jobs, their medical degrees, their licenses. The one guy on Joe Rogan during COVID, right? When I was listening to this one doctor, and he said, "Go ahead and take my license. I'm retired and I breed Andalusian horses. I don't care what you do, because I'm done."
Yeah.
And he's the guy who made the RNA sequences back in the day,
Yeah.
so he understands it, the mRNA. So, and he was the primary guy who was saying, "Don't do this." So look what happens to someone about that, a vaccine. Can you imagine what they would do to somebody who shed light on this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And more, like there's a lot of studies with the vaccine that came. So this is a different rabbit hole. I just want to
right.
insert here that I have lots of opinions on. But if you just look at the Air Force, like before the COVID vaccines, they did not have any cardiac events. They had none. And now, and this, I had to get off of this rabbit hole because it was bad. But I
Mhm.
believe the last time I checked, they had over 1,000,
Wow.
and that's just in the last 4 years. 3 years,
God,
really.
that's staggering.
Yeah, so
Well,
take
anyway, we
what
do
you will
know,
with that.
yeah, we do know that the government does some really shady shit. And um now I'm I'm going to start looking this stuff up. I want to know, um for me personally, I want to know large scale effects from these turbines and solar fields on local weather patterns. Has anybody looked at this? Because local weather patterns then become geographic weather patterns. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. Now I'm right there with you now, Tim. Damn it. So there we go.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, I'm not a climate denier. I'm not one of those that I believe that we do climate changes. That's why it's climate, right? And we've gone through uh, periods of heating and cooling on this planet for eons since the planet was made or built or whatever you want to believe. But we've had those periods, those epic periods, right? Do I believe that me driving my truck is doing it? No, not at all. Um, but I think that I think for me, my belief is that humans have a very little part in the heating of the planet when you consider the output of heat and energy from one volcano. But um, I think we could be in a period of heating again. In the 70s, Time magazine had a picture of a penguin on it, and it told
Yeah.
us all to prepare for the coming ice age. And I'll never forget that because I was terrified. I just thought we were all going to turn into popsicles. I was a kid, and my mom's like, "Just would you not read this stuff?" I mean, I couldn't process what I was reading. I was too young, and that was in the 70s, and now everything's changed. But climate does change. It changes. So
Mm-hmm.
look at this incredible snowstorm that Denver and New Mexico just got, or not Denver, but Colorado and New Mexico just got this weekend. So I think Las Vegas, New Mexico has drifts 6 feet high. That's not normal for them. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then 2 winters ago, I hit -30 in my barn. So I don't know. It's just, I don't know what's going on. Who knows? It could be all related. Don't know.
Yeah.
Sure is.
So I
Yeah.
just sent you an email, Colleen, that'll hopefully blow your mind.
Oh God. Okay. I will read it.
Sounds great.
Okay, well, I think this was a cool episode to dive back into. Speaking of spirits, we won't be coming to you every week, but we will be coming to you regularly. I think we were coming to you every week for a little over a year. Well, I don't know. We've done this for 4 years now, and I think we all hit burnout. And so we're going to hit the recording button again, but we're going to do it a little slowly. Maybe bring you 1 or 2 episodes a month, but we're going to keep recording. And our other platform is the Nightmare Roadshow on YouTube. Please check it out. And we'll look forward to our next topic.
Woohoo!